This morning, we are honored to have with us Tyrone Wirtz, who is an amazing man. You will hear from him yourself, and I'll let you form your own conclusions. But my experience is that he is a man of incredible integrity, and the fact that he served so many years, decades, behind bars, and whose sentence was commuted. Commutation does not happen in this state. I'm sure he would agree with that. There have been extremely few commutations, and it's in part because when he went into prison, found that there was sort of like you have been handed lemons, make lemonade and make it good lemonade, and support the people you're with, help other people to be who they are, and never lose your self-respect. And since then, and through that entire period of time, he has been an inspiration to so many other people and has been widely recognized. I urge you to read his little biography on page 5 to get a more full picture. But I think right now we should just listen to Tyrone Wirtz from Philadelphia. Let's welcome Tyrone Wirtz.
Thank you, John. Thank you so much. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing today? I've been here a couple of days, and it's been a really fabulous conference so far, hasn't it? A lot of great information, great speakers. I thought Michelle did an excellent job yesterday. Excellent. Matter of fact, I was with Michelle down in Nashville a couple of weeks ago at in the mass incarceration conference down there at Vanderbilt University, and with Brian Stevenson. I don't know how many people know about Brian Stevenson. We had for 3 days, we had 3 powerful speakers. We had Brian Stevenson Friday, we had Howard Zare Saturday, and Michelle Alexander to close out on Sunday. You know what I mean? So it was, that was really, really awesome. And Brian Stevenson gave an hour and a half talk that was just so powerful, sequential, without anything written down. And he was very, very powerful. He really moved people. So, as John said, my name is Tyrone Wirtz. I live in Philadelphia. I was born and raised in Philadelphia. I was incarcerated in Graterford Prison for 37 years. I was sentenced to life without parole in 1974. And I recently had my sentence commuted about 4 years ago. Former Governor Ed Rendell commuted my sentence. And as John said, I went into Graterford Prison as a young man, 23 years old, served with a life without parole sentence. I was really angry and bitter at the criminal justice system, specifically at white people, because I had an all-white jury, and they found me guilty of second-degree murder. And in Pennsylvania is unique because it's the only state in the country that gives out the same penalty for 2 degrees of murder. So if you get found guilty of first-degree murder, you can get death penalty or life without parole. And if you get second-degree murder, you also get a mandatory life without parole. And so I was sentenced. I thought I was innocent. I went into prison feeling like I was innocent, that the criminal justice system did me wrong, that they just saw a young black man sitting there and they just kind of rubber stamped my conviction and sentenced me to prison for the rest of my life. And so I get to Graterford Prison, and I see all these guys, specifically black men, walking around Graterford Prison, and I'm in there with this sentence for the rest of my life, and I was trying to find ways to cope with that sentence. And so I anesthetized myself. Unfortunately, our prisons were filled with drugs and alcohol, and homemade alcohol. They're some of the best winemakers in the country. Sure, but anyhow, so because I was angry and I was bitter, I was trying to find a way to anesthetize myself. So I got caught up in what was going on in the prison. And about 6 months into my incarceration, I had this powerful epiphany. Powerful epiphany, because I was really angry and bitter, at the criminal justice system, and racism and those kind of things. But I had 3 milestones that I could look back on that actually made it possible for me to stand here this morning and give this talk. Because in Pennsylvania, once you sentence to life, you're there for the rest of your life until you die. And unfortunately, when we talk about mass incarceration, I witnessed mass incarceration. I saw it because When I first went into Greaterford Prison, there were 7 state prisons in Pennsylvania, 7. There were 5,000 men and women serving time in Pennsylvania. There were 500 people serving life sentences. The budget was about $150 million, right, for run those 7 state prisons. And when I got to Greaterford, there was only about, it's a prison, I don't know if anybody ever seen it, but it's a huge prison. It was built to hold 2,000 people, but when I got there, it was about 1,400. So there's a lot of empty cells. The day I walked out of Greaterford in 2011, I walked out with 28 prisons in Pennsylvania, 28. And they're building 3 more actually right now. 2 2,000-bed prisons right on Greaterford's property and a 200-bed female facility. There are 52,000 prisoners, men and women serving time in Pennsylvania. There are 5,000 men and women serving life without parole. And our budget right now is close to $2 billion. $2 billion. So that's $2 billion that is going into the prison industrial complex that has been taken away from the schools in Philadelphia. That's why we had to close schools and cut programs, extracurricular programs that's really going to educate our kids for the future. So when we talk about the prison, the school to prison pipeline, that is one of the impacts, the collateral consequences of mass incarceration. So I go in, there's only 1,400 prisons, and over the years, I begin to see this steady buildup. First, we reached our maximum capacity, 2,000. And then one day, they locked us all in our cells for a couple of days, and they began to build bunk beds in the cells. And so the cells are about, I could put my hands on both sides of the wall like this, right? You can touch the wall. Single cell for a single man, but they put bunk beds in there. And our population swelled from 1,400 when I went into about the middle of the 80s to about 4,000. Greaterford actually became the 5th largest maximum security prison in the country. You know, so that was my experience. So I just want to give you a little background on me and where I come from. I grew up in North Philadelphia. I come from a good family. And most times people think that people who go to prison come from broken homes, abused homes. That is not my story. I had 8 siblings. I had a mother and father who worked 12-hour days to take care of their 9 children, 6 days a week. But my brother, who was a Baptist minister, one day he said in the pulpit, he said, when we were growing up, our parents introduced us to drugs. And people said, oh, that is so sad. He said, yes, they drug us to Sunday school, drug us to church, drug us to, like 5 days a week, we were spending time in church, you know. So like, I was like 14, 15 years old, and I wanted to hang out with my friends in the summertime. So I kind of rebelled. I was the only one in my family kind of rebelled against my family. I got pushed into the streets, and when I got pushed into the streets, I picked up some really negative values, right? So, and which eventually led me to prison. So when I get to Greaterford, they do these battery of tests. They test you social background, education level, IQ, psychological tests. And what they found out was that I was reading at a 2nd grade level, and my math skills were 3rd grade, and my comprehension skills were 2nd grade. And when the guy told me that, I said, oh, you ain't telling me nothing. I don't know. I know I'm dumb, right? And why I thought I was dumb, because I had a bad experience in elementary school. I had a teacher when I was in elementary school. We had a career day, and we had all these professionals up there talking about what their jobs. And so we had this assignment where we had to write a paragraph about what we wanted to be when we grew up. And in my neighborhood at the time, there was this older guy. He, on his back roof, he had a telescope. I used to go up there, hang out with him when I was really young. He told me all about the universe. He used to let me look through the telescope, point out the stars, told me about light speed. So at a very young age, I was really into the universe, into that kind of stuff. So I went home, I wrote my paragraph, and I go back to school the next day, that Monday, and they called, just like this, the kids, we sitting in the chair, the teacher, Ms. Gomez, I'll never forget her, and I think that we all can think back to the teacher had a great impact on our lives, right? Encourage you to go to school and those kind of things. Ms. Gomez impacted my life in a very powerful way. So I read my paragraph, as they call it. Susie came up, read a paragraph, I want to be a nurse. Tommy came up here, I want to be a policeman. Sally, I want to be a doctor. Johnny, I want to be a lawyer. Tyrone comes up, read this paragraph, and at the end, very proudly, I said, I want to be an astronomer. It was like out of left field, right? And she said, an astronomer? Boy, you ain't smart enough to be no damn astronomer. Where you get that notion from that you can be an astronomer? You ain't that smart. And so throughout that semester, she sent me these messages. I wasn't really that bright, that smart, and I couldn't learn, right? But it wasn't just me. She was an elementary school teacher, but she was an equal opportunity humiliator. She humiliated a lot of the children. I wish I could do some research and find out what happened to all of them. They probably in prison with me. I don't know. But anyhow, but you know, that guy, Mr. Bello, had a great impact on my life. So when I talk about Ms. Gomez had impact, she had a very negative impact on my life. So, you know, I kind of lost my value for education, and I stopped going to school, dropped out early, got pushed deeper into the streets. But Mr. Bello, Mr. Ernie Bello, he was a correctional official. He was a counselor, but he was also a school teacher at night. He said, I'm looking over your scores, and he told me about my grade level. He said, but, you know, your IQ is above average. He said, you can do academic work. You said, you're just not applying yourself. He said, I'm going to put you in my ABE class, Adult Basic Education, so you can get your GED. You know what I told him? I said, man, I want to go to school. I said, I can't learn. I'm not that smart. He said, no, you can learn. I said, I don't want to go to school. I said, I got to get out of this prison. I'm serving life without parole. I ain't got time for school. I don't got it. They're going to kill me in prison. I acquiesced. And I decided to enroll in his class. And I went to school at night, started doing trigonometry, geometry, declension of nouns, conjugating the verb, diagramming sentences. I did pretty well. So when it came time to take the GED test, about 50 guys took the GED test. I sat down, took the test. See, the other thing that Ms. Gomez did, not only did she kill my value for education, she also killed my confidence. She killed my self-esteem. I thought I was dumb, so it kind of killed my hope. So when I took the test, I thought the test was very difficult. I said, wow, this test was hard. Why did I even think that I could pass this test? I walked out that room. A couple of months later, when the test came back, I go down and see Mr. Bello. I said, Mr. Bello, real humbly, how many points I got to make up to get my GED? He said, Tyrone, actually, you passed the test. I said, I passed the test? I almost fainted when he told me I passed the test. He said, yes, you passed. He said, not only that, you got the highest score than anybody who took the test. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, you got any smelling salt around here? So I walked out the room, scratched my head, but you know, my confidence and self-esteem was so low. You know the first thing I thought when he told me that? Nope, wasn't that. I said, if I got the highest score in the test, everybody else that took the test would be dumb as hell, because I knew I was dumb, right? That was the first thing I thought. I'm dumb, I know. If I got the highest score, so I was a valedictorian, so I went on to college. I graduated from Villanova University with a bachelor's degree. And so that was the first milestone. So the second milestone is the Lifers organization. It was a powerful organization and institution. God came in myself and tried to get me involved in the Lifers organization because I was a lifer. I was a young lifer, 23 years old. He wanted to get me involved. He said, look, we're having a seminar Saturday. We got some outside people coming in. We'd like to invite you down so you can learn about what a life sentence is, what you need to do, and those kind of things. I said, I ain't coming to no damn Lifers meeting. I said, I'm not a lifer. I'm just here. I'm trying to get out of here. I'm not want to get caught up in this prison stuff. He said, no, man, it'll be good for you because you got this life sentence. You need to know what you need to do to to better yourself. He said, look, the seminar is about leadership, group dynamics, and those kind of things. So I said, man, I'm not going to no meeting. But again, I acquiesced. And I said, all right, I'll come down to the meeting. So I went down to the meeting, and it's about a lot of lifers down there. They had about 20 outside people. And I don't remember this guy's name. If I'd seen him, I wouldn't have recognized him. But this guy was leading the seminar. And surprisingly, he was a Quaker. He was a Quaker, and he was leading a seminar, talking about leadership and all those kind of things. And so I wasn't really paying attention because I didn't want to be there. The only thing that was on my mind was how I was going to get out from this dehumanizing, oppressive environment that I was living in. That's what I was thinking about. So when they broke for lunch, they had a buffet style, they had tables set up. And like I said, I didn't really want to be there, and I was kind of a laggard. I waited to the end. Sometimes it pays off to be last. So everybody went and got their food, and after everybody finished, I went and got my tray, got my food. I go to, I turned around and surveyed the room for somewhere to sit. There was only one seat. One seat left.
Next to the waiter.
Right. She was brilliant. So it was right across from him. He was like right in front of him, right? Because everybody was talking to the women there. I sat down with him, and so he began to engage me in this conversation about, you know, who I was, my background, my family, those kind of things. And I was telling them I was serving life, I would be the rest of my life and all that. And then like halfway through the conversation, he stopped me and said, son, you seem like a very angry, bitter young man. It comes out in your demeanor. It just oozes out of you. You're just angry and bitter. I said, well, I got a right to be angry and bitter. I said, I'm innocent. I'm incarcerated for the rest of my life. I said, the white racist criminal justice system just saw a black man sitting there and convicted me. So he says, yeah. He said, all that might be true. He said, but you said you have some siblings, you have parents, you have a wife, you have a daughter. He said, man, you got to man up. He said, man up. He said, you got to man up. So I said, well, they're going to need you. I said, how are they going to need me for? I'm the one in prison for the rest of my life. They're in the street. How are they going to need me? I was so selfish, thinking about myself. He said, look, I don't know much about you. I don't know how long you'll be here. If you're going to be a week, 2 weeks, a year, 10 years, 20 years, or you're going to die. I said, I don't know any of that. He said, but I want you to consider one thing. I said, what's that? He said, as long as you're here, create a great life for yourself. And I said, create a great life for myself. I was in prison. I was in Grateford prison. It was an oxymoronic statement to me because in Grateford prison, what I had already witnessed was mental illness, suicide, drug addiction, assaults, murders. That was the environment I was living in. He was saying, create a great life for myself. So I just wrote him off as someone that really knew anything about me, about prisons, and all this kind of stuff. And I just went on back to my cell. Ironically, about a week later, there was a major stabbing in the prison. When they do that, they lock the prison down. And so that week that I was locked in my cell, I began to reflect and do some introspection about my life and what was going on. And I vividly remember the conversation I had with the seminar director about creating a great life for myself. And what happened was I had this powerful epiphany that, because he made me think about my family. And what happened the day that I got sentenced, I was like a guy from North Philly. I didn't want the judge to see me, weakness in me. So I wasn't even paying attention to what was going on in the courtroom. But when the judge sentenced me to life, my family, my wife, my daughter, my sisters, and my friends, they all were crying and weeping that I destroyed my life. I was going to prison. But even the victim's family was crying. And in that moment, I realized I'm sitting here in this prison talking about poor, pitiful me. Feel sorry for me. I'm innocent and all that. And I said, I never thought what my incarceration was doing to my family. And in that moment, I had this epiphany that said, I got to do something different with my life. That I had to, and when I did that, I took responsibility for my crime. I took responsibility for my life. And when I came out of my cell a couple of days later, that good wine I had, I gave it to my friends. I said, I'm not drinking no more. I'm going to school. I'm going to join the Life's Organization. And I went on and became president of the Life's Organization for 20 years. And, the Life's Organization was actually formed because we were organized to change the law so lifers become eligible for parole. And I was doing that for 30 years. But, our plight was falling on deaf ears. Let me give you a little history. So when I told people I had life without parole, I was supposed to die in prison, the question they asked me, well, how did you get out? How did you get out? I said, well, my sentence was commuted. My sentence was commuted. In every state constitution, they got a pardoning process in the Constitution. The Pennsylvania is no different. And so a lifer can actually file to have his sentence changed, not a pardon, but a commutation where you get your status and your sentence changed. Now in Pennsylvania, we had a governor, the last 5 governors have been all prosecutors. So nobody has been getting out on life without parole. And in 1995, during the height of the mass incarceration and get tough on crime and the war on drugs and all those kind of things, they began to change a lot of laws. Now, prior to 1995, a person serving life in prison could go to the commutation board and seek clemency, and you only need a majority vote. But there's 5 people on the board. There's the lieutenant governor, who's the chairperson. You have the attorney general, who's 2 elected officials. And then you have a crime victim, a psychologist, and a corrections expert. Those are the 5 people sitting on the board. And the board was majority vote. So that gave the 2 elected officials cover. But in 1995, they went through a change in the Constitution and they made it turn into a unanimous vote. So you had to navigate that process and get a unanimous vote. So I never thought that I was going to be able to navigate it because I was being president. I did the research, I wrote proposals and bills and all that. So I understood that this is a very difficult situation to navigate, to get 5 votes. And at the time that I filed, the Attorney General was Corbett, the Republican prosecutor, and he had made a vow when he became Attorney General to never vote for a lifer. Never vote for a lifer. So in that context, there was no opportunity for me to get out. But I lost my last appeal in the U.S. Supreme Court in the year 2000. And so my supporters came to me and said, Tyrone, you need to file for commutation. I said, I can't file for commutation. No way I can get past Corbett, who wanted to be governor. He already vowed. No, you need to file. We're going to support you. We're going to support you. And so I acquiesced again. You know that is real negative attitude. Like, no, I'm not going to school. I give in. I'm not going to like this meeting. I give in. File for commutation. No, I gave in. I did. So I filed for commutation in 2002. I filed in 2004. And in order to get a public hearing, you got to get 3 people on the board to vote for you. I got those 3 votes, and I was surprised I even got a public hearing. I got a public hearing. I had to go in front of the commutation board myself and be interviewed. They grilled me for 3 hours, asking me all these questions, which was good. Because it's just like a job application. I would much prefer to be interviewed face to face so I could sell myself as opposed to being just looked at on a resume or application. So that was a good change in the Constitution that they made. And so I think I did very, very well in front of the board. But still, Corbett, Lieutenant Governor, they wouldn't vote for nobody to get out. So the next day they held my public hearing, and you don't go to the public hearing. The applicant doesn't go. So I had my brother, who was my representative before the board, and about 150 people from Philadelphia came up to Harrisburg to support my application. 2 police commissioners, a couple elected officials, and they had a powerful, very powerful session. You only get 15 minutes. My presentation was about 30 minutes. Because there were so many people, so much information. And so when they hear your case, they go into executive session, they talk about it, then they got to come back out in public and vote publicly. So when they came back out, everybody was sitting on the edge of their seats. And so the secretary says, how does the board vote on Tyrone Works? Somebody raised their hand and said, I make a motion that we take this case under advisement. Wow, so everybody was kind of like court and plea. What did that mean, advisement? First time they ever held a life case under advisement. So people were angry, and I said, well, it wasn't a no. Although I still expected a no, because Corbett, So I'm thinking they're going to hold it for like maybe 3 months, 2 months, 3 months, call it back up and take their vote. No, go back, do your life sentence. That's what I was thinking. But actually, they held it for 5 years. Why? That was good. that was good. Yeah. Because if they had voted on right then, Corbett would not have voted for him. You know what I mean? They held for 5 years, but it was good. It was good. Because what happened was, in 2010, Governor Rendell was leaving in 2011. So in 2010 come along, I'm thinking they probably holding for the next governor, right? So when June, July, August come around, I gave up. I'm saying it's too late. I'm gonna miss Rendell. They're not gonna call my case up. So I had to. That was my last best chance. So I went to when I was in Gradyford, I took a walk around the yard for about 2 hours, and I had to purge my system of all hope, any possibility of getting out of Gradyford prison. Because I had to set my fate, I really did. But I was telling somebody this morning that although I was incarcerated, my body was incarcerated, my mind was free. I was experiencing this profound freedom. Because when I became educated, when I got my degree, it was like Plato's allegory in the cave. I had come out to the sunlight. And I wanted to go back into the cave and pull other people out, you know? So I created programs inside the jail to educate, to enlighten other guys, to get them involved in their own freedom, and to get them involved in community building, get them involved in seeing the myriad of problems that we are having, not only in the prison system, but even out in our communities. So that was going to be my legacy. That's how I was coping with my life sentence. I had to go through that. Some people cope with their life sentence by living in delusion. I was living in this reality. And I said that this is my life. This is the prison in my community. This is where I'm going to stake my flag, and this is where I'm going to make my change. And so when November comes around, the election is, Corbett wins the election. And at the end of November, I walk in my cell, coming in from work, and on the floor was a letter from the Pardons Board. I open it up. We will take a vote on your case in December the 16th. They voted on my case, and I got a 4-0. Corbett did not sit because he was the governor-elect. The other 4 people voted me through. Governor Rendell commuted my sentence 2 weeks later. The unfortunate part about that, because it was bittersweet for me. When people say, how was it? It was bittersweet. Because the day that I left Gradyford, I lived in a D block at the far end. Gradyford had this long corridor. And because I was president of the Life Organization for so long, when I came off the block on my way home, there was about 300 lifers in the hallway to greet me. And I'm hugging these guys. I'm telling y'all right now, I'm from North Philly. I'm tough as nails. I don't cry. I don't show no weakness. But the day I was leaving, I had tissues. I was weeping like a baby. And people said, "Oh yeah, you were happy you was going home?" I said, "I was happy I was going home." I said, "But the reason I was crying because I was leaving those guys behind."
Yeah.
And because I looked in their eyes and I knew if nothing changes, they're going to die there. I'm talking about men that we served. When people say, "You served 37 years," I said, "Yeah, but I'm a baby." There are men and women that got 45, 50, 55 years in. There's one guy named Joe Leeson. He was 15 years old. How many years he got in? 63. He got 63 years in. And the state is just resistant to change the law to give some of these older guys who are walking on canes, got all kind of medical problems. They refuse to let them go. Instead of letting go, you know what they did? They built a hospital prison called Lower Highlands. And guys who are infirm, walking canes, they ship them up there to die. And so it was very sad for me when I left. They live in an environment where it is very, very dehumanizing. And people say, "How did you survive? How do you get all your mental faculties?" Because when I first went in, after I became my right frame of mind, I looked down the block and I seen these massive of men with no hope, with nothing to do, with no purpose. And to me, I said they look like pieces of meat with eyes, because that's how we incarcerate people. We put them in cages and we strip them of their humanity, strip them of their dignity, strip them of their hope, fill them with despair, fill them with negativity. And I vowed early on in my incarceration, I will not allow this place to strip me of my human dignity. And I carried myself in a way that I treated everybody with respect and with dignity. And I would not allow them to strip me of my humanity. And that's the kind of environment that men and women are incarcerated under. And I just want to give you one other tidbit. I work for this organization at Temple University called the Inside Out program. And Inside Out actually take college students in the prisons to do their whole semester side by side with prisoners. It's a radical program, revolutionary program. It's the only organization in this country where every semester thousands of students are going into prisons all around the world, side by side with prisoners, and they're being enlightened, they're being educated about the prison system. These are our future leaders. Why did I tell y'all that? I forgot. But anyhow, so I came home. I work at Temple University. I work for the Public Defender Association as a consultant, and I'm also a Social Justice Fellow. And I have a program where I'm working with ex-offenders when they come home, providing them with mentors and getting them jobs and those kind of things, which is very difficult in some respects. Very, very difficult. So me and my partners realized that we had to put together an economic component. Reentry without an economic component is going to fail. Because there are a lot of guys that come, men and women come home who want to do the right thing. Because everybody, I hate to be trying to be the poster boy for reentry. I have not. Everybody didn't have the support that I had. They don't have the, I was just different. I mean, not different like better. I'm saying different in the fact that I had strong family support. My family come to visit me every 90 days for the 37 years I was incarcerated. I was politically engaged when I was inside the institution. I had thousands of supporters out in the community all around the country. So everybody who lives in prison don't have that. They don't have family. They don't have support. They don't have a job waiting for them. And when they come home, they think that because they went to school, they got their GEDs, they got their certificates, they got certified, I'm going home, I'm going to get me a job, I ain't coming back. And you know what happens? They come home and there's no job, there's no support, and after 3-4 months, you're living with someone, you got children, you're not bringing no money to the table, and as a man, you feel kind of way about that, and you're 3-4 months, 5 months of being broke, everybody slamming the door from you, othering you, ostracizing you. Eventually, guys begin to devolve, and eventually you go back to prison. And the system is set up for them to fail. It really is. As an example, I'm on parole for the rest of my life, and I got to pay $30 every month to be harassed, right, by the parole board.
We could do that for free.
Yeah, you did. Harass me for free. I got to charge you $30. You know what I mean? So, I mean, every parolee that come home had to pay $30 for pay a supervision fee. Yes. Not only that, that's minor. What they also had to do is pay court costs and fines, which can be $5,000, $6,000.
Right.
And then your parole agent say go down to the traffic court and get on. If you got any traffic tickets, get on payment plan.
Right.
Can you imagine the frustration that they call? I don't have a job. You only pay $30, court costs and fine, and traffic tickets, and I don't have a job, and I'm just coming home from prison.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the kind of that's what we got. So the system is really built for people to fail. So that was my experience in prison. You know, when I came home, you know, a friend of mine said, when I told him about my experience coming home, he said, you know, you was going through survivor guilt, you know, about leaving those guys behind. So I come home and I'm happy. I'm happy. So this is my experience coming home. So when they changed the Constitution in 1995, made a unanimous vote. What they also did was, see, prior to 95, that when a governor signed a commutation, you became a regular parolee. They had no more jurisdiction over you. So if you violated parole, you went there, back to prison, you came back home and they re-paroled. But in 95, they changed it and they said, any lifer commuted lifer who commits another crime or violates parole will be given his life sentence back. Yes. So when I came home, I was like, there's things I'm going to do and there's things I'm not going to do. Like, so when I first got home, like I used to go to all the stores. You know the first thing I look for? The camera. I make sure I was on the camera. I go in, on the camera, because I didn't want somebody to say Tyrone Brooks is over here doing something. I said, no, you went on 7-Eleven, look at the camera. I was in there at that time. You know, or what else I did? I used to go to the counter and the girl, the salesperson would say, your total is $17.99. I'll say, $17.99? You robbing me. You have a gun and a mask. She laughed. And I said, you know what time it is? She is 2:45. You know why I did that? So she remembered me. I said, no, you gonna talk to her. She said, yeah, I remember him. He said, I should have a gun and a mask. You know what time it was? Yeah, it was 2:45. You know. And I got, what else? I dress like this every day. I don't wear jeans, hoodies, you know, for racial profiling. You know, I don't want the police rolling down the street. I got a pair of Timbs, jeans, a hoodie. And they said 6'2" black man just robbed 7-Eleven. When they look at me, I hope they ride right past me, you know what I mean? So things like that. I was trying to prevent myself from going back and getting a life sentence. So that's part of my story of how I got out, my experience when I first came home. And you know, it's just been great. I've been working, I've been traveling, I've been speaking around. But there's a lot of issues to fight, and we talk about mass incarceration. And a lot of times we talk about mass incarceration, we talk about, you know, nonviolent first-time offenders, and you know, it's caught up in when they change our laws, begin to criminalize culture and those kind of things. But the biggest issue for me is life without parole. Because people talk about the death sentence. Life without parole is a death sentence. It's death through incarceration. And here's the thing, and I always like to tell people this. I'm quite sure you heard that over the years, a lot of innocent people have been coming off death row, right? Because death row got a lot of support all around the world. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of pro bono lawyers, there's a lot of information. And there's people that's invested in stopping this state-sponsored murder. So they are doing a lot of work, and they're getting all these innocent people off of death row. Well, think about it. Think about how many innocent people, men and women, serving life, who don't have the resources, who don't have the same support, who are innocent, who are going to die in prison, who've been there 30, 40, 50 years, and they can't get no help. Because everybody say, well, at least you want to live. You know, so and that's the big issue for me. And my work is not only just working with guys coming home from prison, but I'm very heavily involved in trying to change the law so that Pennsylvania can be a state that is give guys opportunities for parole, like they got in other states. Just recently, Pennsylvania used to had the largest number of men and women serving life without parole in the world. Pennsylvania, yeah. Florida just overtook us, you know, by about 100 lifers. But Pennsylvania still has the largest number of juveniles sentenced to life without parole. And so that's my mission, because I know that there are a lot of good guys. Everybody talk about me. There's some extraordinary guys in prisons throughout this state, throughout this country, who are smart. Some of them don't know how smart they are, but they are brilliant. They are doing some great work. They are great people who've taken responsibility for their lives and for the things they did, who can be great assets to our community. But they won't get the chance because our state, particularly this state, which is, I think, the worst state in the country, it refuses to see us as human beings. You know, so that's the story of life, sort of life in prison in Pennsylvania. That's my story of how I was able to navigate and get out. And so I'm still committed to ending mass incarceration, and specifically working to try to get lifers out of prison so they can come home and be with their families. I remember now while I was telling you a story about Inside Out. Well, because Inside Out, we train college professors from around the world, right? So I met people from Denmark, from Scandinavian countries, from other countries. And when they told me about their prison system, I'm stunned. Yeah. It's a prison, it's incarceration where if people have to be removed from society, they do it in a positive way to build people up, right? To treat them like human beings. Don't strip them of their dignity because they're coming home. That's their model. I mean, like in Denmark, the highest time you get for any crime is 21 years. Yeah. So, and I'm thinking about that as I'm talking to these people. I'm saying, well, why do America is so bent on destroying people who are incarcerated? I won't tell you why. Personally, I think it's because of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. And people think that slavery is ended. Slavery has not ended. Slavery has not been abolished. And I really think that's inspiration. Because when they wrote the 13th Amendment to end slavery, they said in all surrounding states, slavery shall be abolished, except for those who are duly convicted of a crime. So if you're convicted of a crime, you are still a slave. And as a slave, you are property. And that's property. I can do to you what I wish. You're not human. You're a thing. You're property. You're a commodity. That's why we building prisons all over the state, and prisons are now just warehouses for commodity. Human beings as commodities to create an economics for people who, when they try to create this global economy, all these companies moved overseas for cheap labor. Ain't that something? They don't want to give people a living wage. So they move overseas and pay people $2 an hour with no benefits and left all our people destitute, without jobs, without pensions. So what they do, they build prisons. And they criminalize culture and behavior to feed that system. Private prisons, they are on Wall Street. People have pensions and 401ks invested in the private prison industry. Which is foolhardy. Because you make your money based on how many butts you got in the bed. There's no incentive for you to solve people's problems. You need butts in the beds to make your money. And so that is the environment that we're living in. That's why we got to create, as Michelle Alexander said, we got to create this movement to stop that they are destroying lives. And we even talk about the collateral consequences, not just of one's criminal conviction, but their families, their children, their communities are being destroyed. Money is being shifted from Philadelphia upstate. And people are suffering because of mass incarceration. We just talk about the people in prison. It ain't just them. It's the children. There are over 5 million children who have incarcerated parents. And it's a shame. And that's why we got to change things in this country. We got to generate this movement, you know what I mean, so we can change things. So thank y'all very much. And I will be here. Thank y'all very, very much. So you can ask me anything you want. I don't have no problem answering any question, personal, private.
Can I go ahead? I'm going to just carry it to you.
This is just a comment on the Scandinavian countries.
Yes.
They view someone having to be imprisoned as a failure of their society, not of the individual.
Right, okay, great. Thank you so much for that.
You want to call on them and I will.
Yeah, okay, yes, ma'am.
Wait. Here he comes. Very short, he's coming.
I've had the privilege to get to know Comer Glass. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, Coleman Glass, he's started a veteran organization in Greater.
Exactly. My husband's a veteran, and one of the great tragedies is seeing such a beautiful man trapped in the system.
Yeah.
And are you working to? I mean, how do we do this? How do we work to get him and people like him out?
Actually, there's a number of things. What I did, one of the things that I did was I went to the University of Pennsylvania because I had a professor friend there, and I actually started a program to have students work on life guys' cases, right? So she had all her students, and she had like 100-something students, and I gave her names of guys' cases to work on. So that's one thing. The other thing is we really got to lie down legislature to create a law. I mean, look, we have life without parole, and it's without any discretion. It's mandatory. In some states, like California, you know, I'm quite sure everybody know about Charlie Manson, right?
Yes.
Charlie Manson he demonstrated he's a dangerous and a threat to public safety, but you know Charlie Manson get a parole hearing every 2 years. Every 2 years, yeah. The system is set up so that, the system is good because instead of just having a blanket life without parole, which they do now, but prior to that, they had a system where every person who sentenced to life could file for parole every 2 years, and then they will take an assessment of them, look at them, their background, their culpability in crime, what they did in the institution, their rehabilitation, and they make a determination whether this person can be reintegrated back into the community. Now, somebody like Charlie Manson, although he's lawfully able to get a parole hearing, they never want to let him out. And that's the kind of system we was trying to get here in Pennsylvania, where you got to look at each individual and make a determination, not just blanket. Because the part of the story that I didn't tell you was that I was 2 blocks away when this crime happened. And I told those guys I wouldn't have nothing to do with it. Right? So I got life sentence. The person who pulled the trigger got life sentence, but the other 2 guys got something less than that. Yeah, see, because our system is arbitrary and capricious. It really is. And so it almost doesn't matter what your role is. They say we are a country, we are ruled by laws. And if you get found guilty, no matter what your culpability, no matter what your status or involvement in the crime, if you get found guilty of first, second degree murder, it's a mandatory sentence. So we got to lobby legislators. We got to educate people that lifers are the best. I mean, look, since 1941, about 600 and so lifers have been commuted. The recidivist rate is less than 1%. You know what I mean? And where our normal, regular recidivist rate is close to 66%. So they've demonstrated they are the best risk for a parole option. Yes, sir. Oh, yes, sir. Oh, let's give him then you.
What has your luck in terms of reaching out to the Department of Justice in terms of communicating your story? Have you had any contacts or any way to do that?
I don't think they want to hear from me. One of the things, like, as successful as me, John Dye, and thousands of other guys in the community who serve time, the bottom line is, what I run into. Sometimes I go speak, I'm dressed like this, people say, yeah, I spent 37 years in prison. I thought you was a lawyer or a doctor. I thought you was a lawyer or a judge or something. I didn't know but because what happens is people sometimes still see us as ex-offenders, as criminals, right? So they want to hear from us. No, I've never been in contact with the justice. I don't have no apparatus to even do that or understand why I would do that.
Okay. I'll meet with you. I've got a name for you.
Okay, that's good. That's good. I appreciate that.
Saying no again.
Yeah, it probably work out that way, right?
Your story touches me so deeply.
Thank you.
I've volunteered for 10 years in New York prisons. Got to be close to really amazing people.
Guys, yes.
And they would come up every 2 years
Yeah.
for parole, but
right.
they'd get hit with 2 more.
Two more,
Just
yes.
consistently.
Consistently, yes.
Totally, predictable.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to ask you, one of the things problems I had in prison, and it really, I just found it increasingly difficult and increasingly depressing, was the attitude of staff, administration, towards these people that I came to love and admire and learn from.
Yes.
I couldn't account for it, except that, it was a job, and their job depended on certain behavior.
Yeah.
But I'm just wondering, you said, well, the 13th Amendment.
Right.
But what sense have you made of that dark negativity towards other human beings?
Yeah.
It just seems crazy to me. And you point out, in Scandinavia, they have open prisons in Denmark, right? No walls, no gates.
I mean, I think she just said it is they see the people who are incarcerated as a failure of their society and not the people. And I think that's the difference between we see, we into think about personal responsibility when the playing field is not level, and I think that's part of it, that they hold the individual responsible instead of the failure of our society. And then you have this power dynamic, right? And then you got racism, right? And so all those things together play into dehumanizing individuals or people. You know what I mean? So I think that is, you take all that together, and it's really a horrifying experience it's a wonder that anyone who gets out of prison are able to function.
Yeah.
There's new research going on that people who have an prison experience is actually suffer from post-traumatic stress. You know, because, here's a question.
Somebody else had a hand up before.
You gotta go back here.
Oh.
Gotta keep your eyes on the back too.
Okay, you're right. Back there then.
I am Tila from the Friends Committee on National Legislation.
Yes.
Thank you for your talk.
Thank
I just want to comment, make a quick comment about the Scandinavian countries. They have done really well with their prison system, but I think it's important for us to note that they also have a racially homogenous society, and so the people in prison look like the people outside of prison. So, and that's not what we have going on in this country. So,
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm saying about the race.
to lift that up,
We're not doing well with the people from the Middle East too.
Right, especially in Europe. Here's a question, Miss. Oh, go ahead. You next. Oh, well, after
I
her.
can speak loud.
No, you can't.
Is this on?
Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now? I know there's a lot of gradations in prison experience in terms of what it's like.
Yeah.
We had some Quakers in Maryland working particularly on the solitary confinement,
Yes.
including stories we've seen recently about 15, 16-year-old kids
Right.
that are in solitary confinement for 120 days,
Right.
sometimes in darkness, sometimes in rooms that are maybe 4 by 8, something like that.
Yes.
And just in terms of, that's moving to me in terms of the horror of doing that to individuals. You know, 34 years under any circumstances away from your family is awful. 20 days, 100 days, locked in a dark room by yourself.
Yes.
I don't know if you've had any personal experience or experience with friends that have gone through that. It's just,
Yeah.
I think we need to understand what we are doing to people
Yeah.
in our society and in our names.
Yeah, I think that's a really good.
Torture.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it really is. I mean, that. Now, personally, I've never been to the hole. Thank God. You know, but I certainly have heard horror stories of. I mean, I know guys that've been in solitary confinement for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You know, in solitary and with no human contact. You know, and, you know, I was down. I mean, look, I was down south in Nashville, North Carolina, and they're death row. And they actually got guys walking around. They have meetings, go to school, and those kind of things on death row. And our death row is individual. I mean, you're an individual cell, and even when you go in the yard, you got an individual cage, so there's no human contact. And solitary confinement is just like being on death row, right? And in some respects, it's worse because they always try to dehumanize you even more when you're in the hole. You know, there was a Stanford study that was done. I'm quite sure you probably heard about it, where this guy built this prison in the bottom of the school, and he was running this test. He made half the students guards and the other half students. And it was supposed to run for a couple of months, but they had to stop it after 2 weeks because the people who became guards really got into that role and began to punish their classmates in ways that were horrific, right? And so they had to stop the experiment. And so you take that and you extrapolate that back to a prison, where there's no control like that to stop people from, in this power dynamic, begin to treat people and dehumanize them. And like I said, there are a number of reasons why, because of racism and the way that we see people and their incarceration in this country. So it's a horrible experience. I know people that committed suicide who came out of solitary confinement with severe mental illness problems. They had to go on take medication. It's a horrible experience for anybody to go through that. I don't know why. When we say 95% of the people incarcerated in this country is coming home, while we will treat them like animals and poke them with a stick and expect them to act any other way when they get out. Yes.
I wonder if you'd comment on how, when you were the president of the Lifers Association, how you helped to initiate the establishment of our Thank You for Your Kindness cards as an antidote to violence.
Yes.
And how that has exploded into the global kindness revolution as an antidote to violence and as a way of evoking more compassion in people.
Yeah. Okay, so as president of the Life's organization, I mean, I had this duality. I mean, I certainly wanted people out of prison because the prisons are horrific and they destroy people. But I also, on the other side, was worried about my community, my family, children, those kind of things. So I work with, what's your name again? I'm bad with names, so don't tell me your name, I won't forget it.
Judith.
Judith, right, Judith. So I worked with Judith, and we created a kindness movement. I haven't been involved in it because I was doing some other thing, but Judith went on and turned into a global phenomenon to just talk about kindness. We need to be kind to people. And so she created kindness circles, and I was really interested in that because I really wanted guys to go home and be kind to their children, to their family, the other people in their community. So that was great that we was able to create that. Who got the mic? Go ahead.
I'm a little nervous, so bear with me.
Hold it close.
Hold it closer? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
It's not a commercial.
Your story in some ways sounds like mine. When I was in 5th grade, they tested me, found me to be borderline mentally retarded and not to bother with academia.
Yeah.
Okay. I made it through college, I made it through graduate school. But there, for the grace of God, I could have wound up on the street or on death row very, 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 very easily. I owe that to my father, making sure that we got out of the Brooklyn neighborhood that we were in.
Right.
Having worked as a counselor and therapist, I would like to hear what you have to say about mental health in the prison system, because that seems to be where my calling is.
Well, actually, I don't know. Well, there's 2 points, right? First of all, we know that what we did in this country, or I don't know about this country, but I know we did in the state, that we shut down all the mental health institutions and hospitals and stuff like that, and they actually shifted people to prison, unfortunately. But also, it's not just that. The whole incarcerated experience generates mental illness, right? And the sad part about that is because the experience is so horrifying that you can't get any help in prison. I mean, some guys get help, but they medicate you. It's all about pills, right? And so even guys who are experiencing mental health issues will not go seek treatment. You know why? I mean, it was so bad that we had a TV station. They used to advertise. They put signs on the board. If you feeling depressed, you got issues, come down and see us. Nobody's going down there and see those guys. You know why? Because they're afraid that they're going to write something negative in their file, and it's going to affect them. Well, they got psychologists there. I mean, but they work in the prison, so I mean, how good are they? You know, so but nobody would go down and see you. I mean, some guys who might need help. The fear is that they will put something negative in your jacket, in your file, and then when it comes up for parole, that it will adversely affect you. So nobody go down and talk to the psychologist.
Are they right?
Huh?
Is that true? Are they right?
Nobody knows. We don't know, you know, so nobody's going down to find out. And then, in other times you go down there, if you guys who do go down, they wound up on Thorazine and other medications that inhibit them, you know. So there is no serious mental health treatment in prisons, you know, unfortunately. And you know, like I said, when they empty out the mental health hospitals, they send a lot of people to prisons.
When Nelson Mandela was inaugurated as president of South Africa, he invited some of the prisoners, he'd been in prison for 3 decades, to the ceremony.
Right.
And the prison guards, that's what I mean, sorry, yeah. And I think that he had a political awareness.
Mm-hmm.
He was teaching the prison guards politics.
Yeah.
And some of them understood that, and he invited them to the inauguration.
Right.
Do you think there's any possibility of that kind of awareness happening in America?
I don't know about America, but I know that look, we got prison guards, and I always say that prison guards are people too. You know, unfortunately, they are working in a system that kind of destroys them too. You know what I mean? And so, and when we talk about people in prison having pathologies, well, we got a lot of staff that got pathologies. You know what I mean? And so, but there are. I have a lot of prison guard friends, like I said, because I carry myself in a certain way, and I kind of recognize them as people that have jobs, but they're caught up in a system that is not human being friendly.
Yes.
Right? So not only does it destroy prisoners, but also destroy prison guards. I mean, there are a lot of prison guards who are suffering from alcoholism. They talk about it, and when I leave, I just got over there. It ain't you guys, some of the staff I work, those kind of things, because the environment is very oppressive. I mean, you got to really be there to feel it. I mean, sometimes you're not even aware of it, but it affects you physically and emotionally, and psychologically. It really does. And so being in there 16 hours, those guards, I mean, it has an effect on them. So you can imagine with the impact that it has psychologically, emotionally on people who are housed there, So, I mean, I don't know. She has.
There are some people on this side of the
room.
room.
I'm sorry.
Not directing your.
Yeah, you're right. John, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I just got that message.
Just want to thank you, very much for your story. And I come back to an issue that's very important that you've lifted up, which is the issue of clemency and pardon.
Right.
Because from the very beginning of time, elected officials and kings and everybody have had the power to commute and to grant clemency. And that has almost gone off the landscape completely from our culture, which is a terribly dangerous thing. I mean, it means forgiveness is no longer in our vocabulary.
That's right.
And that's, spiritually and morally a horrible turn of events. Not that I think this is a systemic way of solving our issues, but if we let forgiveness get lost, can you give us any advice about how can we bring this back as part of the constellation?
Yeah. Oh, that is such a great point. That is such a great point because I tell people there are a lot of powerful forces in the world, right? And we all know the most powerful force is love, right? Love is the most powerful. But the second, right behind love, is forgiveness. It's a powerful force. I mean, it can radically change everything. And our system is so. It is spiraling down. It's not getting better, right? And a lot of those, the good aspects of our society are slowly being washed away, like forgiveness, clemency, pardon, love, those kind of things. And so I think the kindness revolution is one way to do that, to get people to start thinking about being kind to one another. But a lot of it is focused on our legislature. To give you an example, we have a Secretary of Corrections named John Wetzel. I like the guy. He was on the pardons board. I like him because he voted to let me home. But in just terms of the secretary, he's been pretty good, I would think. And just give you two examples. When he was appointed to be Secretary of Corrections, there were 4 prisons on the roadmap to being built. One of the first things he did was he stopped one of them.
Yeah.
And know what happened? He got called up to Harrisburg into front of the legislature and was excoriated and was ridiculed. Actually, how dare you stop this prison? Those are jobs for my constituents. You know what I mean?
Was he under Corbett then?
Yes, he was under Corbett, yeah. He was under Corbett, but he got excoriated by the House and the Senate because he stopped that prison. And then just 2 years ago, he went, every year when they submit their budget, he had to go back up there and they was asking him, why you need another $200 million? You already got a $2 billion budget. And he was like getting on his case about when they increase his budget. You know what he said? He said, it ain't my fault. He said, it's your all's fault. You're the one that keep passing these laws. You're the one that keep sending people to prison. If you send them to prison, I got to have somewhere to house them. I got to have somewhere to give them treatment. I got to feed them. I got to do things. So it's not, don't blame me. You are the problem. You're the one that keep passing these laws that arrest and lock up and sentence people to these long terms in prison. So it's that kind of attitude in our legislature that passes these kind of draconian laws and policies that kind of wipe away forgiveness and instilling fear in people and things like that. So how do we do that? We can do it through the kindness revolution. We can do it by getting involved in this movement. We can do it by really becoming educated on our elected officials and elected people who are truly into changing the system. I'll give you an example. Okay, so we see, when I was in prison, I used to watch the political races, and you know who get elected, the politicians say, I'm going to be tough on crime. I'm going to be tough on crime. What does it mean when the politicians say that? Send people to prison, harsher sentences, more police, more enforcement, more prisons. That wouldn't mean being tough on crime. That's not being tough on crime. That's being tough on the individual being caught. Right? It doesn't change anything in the community. We got 52,000 prisoners. Nobody's feeling any different about their community. And I would say, sir, no, I think the way to be tough on crime is by investing in early childhood education, right? By building housing and job development and training. Those are the things you do to be tough on crime. You know, but our culture is now about harshness and punishment, and it's just washing away the whole idea of being kind to people. Who got the mic?
I have one over here. You and others have clearly described to us some of the barriers that face returning citizens when they come back. The difficulty of getting a job, the difficulty of coping with the debts they have, the difficulty of getting housing. Where do you see people who are doing good work in that area? Where do you see the path forward? What are some models that you've encountered that you think are promising to help change that situation?
Okay, so yeah, I do a lot of that. But first of all, I think that a lot of people that's in this industry, in this work, really need to build coalitions, right? Yes. And they really do. Everybody's trying to, because I think I was telling someone this morning in the car that I think foundations and people that give money to nonprofits are part of the problem, because they make people. They have a small pool of money, but you got all these organizations, everybody fighting for that, so people don't want to work together, they want to get their piece of the pie, and I really think we need to build coalitions. But the other piece is, I think we really need to galvanize the ex-offender or returning citizen community. That's what I'm trying to do. I mean, because I'm just one individual, but there are thousands, literally thousands of men and women like me who serve time in prison, who are doing well in the community, who are running organizations, who are teaching, who are working hard, raising families, running businesses, and I think we need to galvanize those guys. I mean, part of my program that I have is I do the mentorship, and I don't call it mentoring, I call it job being coaches, right? I try to hook a guy coming out of prison, guy, when I say guy, I mean men and women, coming out of prison with a job coach. Instead of me or my organization trying to find thousands of jobs, I find one guy. Your one job is to get one job for your guy that you coaching, you know. And so we kind of spread the work out, you know, instead of one organization trying to find jobs, because they can't find enough jobs for all these guys. So we set up a system where we're trying to galvanize. My fellowship was about developing leadership in guys, ex-offenders, guys who come home from prison, and get them to begin to work with other guys coming home from prison. So we spread the work out. So we call them job coaches. And when a guy come out, we go in, meet with people, and then when they come home, we hook them up with a job coach. And I say that person's one job is not only to be a mentor, help him navigate through resources, but his one job is to get him a job. You know, so that's one way to do it. You know, so I think. But, also, I think we got to put pressure on corporations. We got to put pressure on corporations to begin to hire. I mean, they talking about the Koch brothers in New York are doing some really creative things. You know, they investing money. It was surprised me, but they're doing it. You know, they're really getting involved. And so we got to put pressure on politicians. We got to bang the box. We got to. There's a number of things we need to do, but we need to begin to put pressure on corporations to begin to hire. Give guys opportunities to get jobs.
So thank you very much for your experience. I also wanted to ask you a question, and maybe if you can elaborate for those who are here, about the importance of communication and about the importance of even just letter writing, or breaking down the barriers by just going to visit someone who's outside of your normal circle. Mm-hmm. And that, being that you spent so much time inside, brother, that maybe you can relay to the people here today, that not to be afraid, that these people aren't what society stereotypes them as, and just the importance of communication and how that can make a difference of a person returning. Yeah,
okay, that's a great point. That's why I think Inside Out is such a powerful organization, because, I mean, sometimes we send people into prisons like 2 or 3 people at a time, but we send thousands of students in. And on our website, there's a quote that I made some years ago, and it's right on the my banner says, the wall is not there just to keep us in, it's but to keep you out, right? And so your images of who's behind the wall comes from TV, news media, and those kind of things. And what they put out there, project out there, that these monsters behind the wall, these monsters, because I was stunned at when I just invite people in for meetings, we sit around the table, and we walk down the hallway, they say, this is one of the best meetings I've ever been to. They say, like, it's unbelievable, y'all are human beings. I said, yeah, what do you thought we were? You know what I mean? What do you think we were, right? And because those are the images that are out there, people, they're monsters, and they come in their meetings, and there's nothing to be afraid of. We're human beings. One other reason I dress like this is because I want people to see that lifers, people in prison look like me. Yeah. They do, they like me. They're smart, they're intelligent, they are people of compassion, people of integrity. Some of them. You know what I mean? But the fact of the matter is, one of the things that we need to do, okay, so the organization I work for, no, what we're doing, we actually have community meetings in prisons every 6 weeks. So anybody that want to go to visit prison, I promise you they'll let you out. Okay? You can contact me, and I can schedule you to go to Gradyford and meet this extraordinary group of guys who will take you through a workshop and get to meet, because it's one thing to be on this side of the wall and advocate for people and you don't know who you're advocating for. But they are human beings, they are some great guys. You go in and meet them. Students across the world, lives have been transformed because they go in with one image and they go in and meet these guys and say, wow, best class I ever taken. It transformed my life. I'm changing my major. I'm going into criminal justice to change the criminal justice system. So, and communication. So if you can be a pen pal, if you go in and visit, that's a powerful tool to help guys. Because I'm telling you right now, if I didn't have access to that, I wouldn't be standing here. It was people like you that supported me and got me out. So,
I'm going to say I think this will probably be our last question. So, who did you point to?
Beautiful Lynn back there, the ex-offender. That's she always say.
I'm going to say you'll have an opportunity to hear more from Tyrone in a workshop.
Yeah, tomorrow.
So that's tomorrow. We'll have opportunity. There are further opportunities. We're not ending.
I just want to ask you, you know about the bonding program, right?
The what?
The federal bonding program?
Yeah, absolutely.
That'd be something maybe you could tell them about so they know that that's some way they can push people over there so they can help them when they get
Okay,
jobs.
so like in Philadelphia, they passed a law. They actually, see, this is well, I didn't say this about our city, Philadelphia. They actually passed a thing in city council signed by the mayor to give companies a $10,000 tax break for every ex-offender they hire.
Yeah.
Nobody's taking advantage of it. Nobody, right? And they also have this, the federal government has this federal bonding program that it's about $25,000 bonding, right?
No, you can get, each person that's an ex-offender can go to an employment office
Right.
and you can get $3,000 to bond yourself. So if you try to go get a job, you can say, look, I got this bond for $3,000. So if I steal anything, got the bond. And it kind of helps people start their own business.
Excuse me, where you from?
North Carolina.
That's down in North Carolina.
It's the federal program, man.
No, but actually it's a $25,000 bond.
Well, I don't know about that one, so you might tell me about that
Well,
one.
that's
I know about the $3,000 one, and I know that you're allowed to get a bond for yourself through the federal government.
Yeah.
So when you're going around, at least try to help a little bit to get a job that you can tell people, look, if something gets gone or something happens, I got a bond.
I got a bond. Yeah.
And sometimes when you're starting your own business, which is most of us need to do because nobody's going to give us no job, is you start your own business and you have this bond. And then you go around and say, look, I'm a cleaning service, I'm this, I'm that, or whatever, and I have this bond.
Right.
And it makes people feel comfortable. Sometimes you still might not get a job, but they're more likely to be like, well, he went that far to do that, or she went that far to do that, she must be serious. Right. Call and find out what it's about. So I think that's a real important tool that some of us can use.
Okay. So one other thing, he wanted to give out is the Inside Out Prison Exchange program. Look at the website. That's where we send students in.
Is that the website?
Yeah.
Inside Out?
Inside Out Prison Exchange program. Yeah. So thank you, everybody, so very much.
Thank you so very
much.